I'm Aston. I'm 28 years old, and 5 days before Thanksgiving, my own father left me a voicemail telling me I was no longer welcome in my family. Before I tell you how that single message led to the complete collapse of their business and the desperate midnight voicemails begging me for help, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. It was a Tuesday. The air was getting that crisp November chill, the kind that smells like wood smoke and dying leaves. I was finishing up a quarterly tax projection for the family business, our family business, I should say. At least that's what I thought it was. My phone buzzed on the desk. A missed call from my dad. Then the voicemail notification popped up. I almost ignored it. We'd had a fight a few days earlier. A bad one. But something told me to listen. I put the phone to my ear, and my father's voice, cold and detached, filled the silence of my apartment. Aston, he began, no warmth, no preamble. Your mother and I have talked. We think it's best if you don't come for Thanksgiving this year. Things are too tense. We've decided to cut you off from the holiday. Please respect our decision. A click. That was it. The words hung in the air, sharp and brutal. Cut you off. Not let's talk. Not we need space. It was a verdict. An exile. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was encased in ice. This wasn't just about a turkey dinner. This was about everything. Years of being the family workhorse, the reliable one, the one who fixed every problem my golden boy older brother, Leo, created. My fingers trembled as I hovered over his contact. I thought about typing 1,000 things. Why? What did I do? Please, let's just talk about this. But what was the point? They had made their decision. They didn't want a conversation. They wanted my submission, my silence. So I gave it to them, but not the way they expected. I typed out 2 words. Just 2. I understand. And I hit send. The confirmation swooshed through the speaker. A sound of finality. A door slamming shut. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the glow of my computer monitor. A cold resolve hardening inside me. They wanted to cut me off? Fine. I would cut them off too. I opened the company's administrative portal. My name, Aston, was listed as a primary administrator on everything. The accounting software, the payroll system, the merchant accounts, the tax filing software. With a series of quiet, deliberate clicks, I began to untangle myself from the web I had built and maintained for them for a decade. Revoke access. Transfer ownership to a generic company email. Remove administrator privileges. Click, click, click. By 3 a.m. it was done. I hadn't just removed my name. I had removed myself. I was a ghost. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they wouldn't even notice. Not at first. But they would. Oh, they would. You can't understand the fire without knowing how the kindling was laid. My entire life, I lived in the shadow of my older brother, Leo. He was charming, handsome, and could talk his way out of anything. I was the quiet one, the one who was good with numbers and computers. In my family, that didn't make you special. It made you useful. The clearest memory I have, the one that really set the template for our whole lives, happened when I was 12. My grandfather, my mom's dad, had given my parents this incredibly ornate, antique vase. It was a family heirloom, worth a small fortune. It sat on a pedestal in our formal living room, a room no one ever used. One afternoon, Leo and his friends were roughhousing, throwing a football inside the house like my mom had told them 100 times not to. I was in my room trying to figure out how to build a website. I heard the crash. It was a sickening sound. A sharp crack followed by the crystalline shatter of 1,000 pieces hitting the hardwood floor. I ran out. Leo was standing there, his face white, the football at his feet amidst the glittering remains of the vase. His friends were already sneaking out the back door. "What did you do?" I whispered, my heart pounding. "I didn't do anything," he snapped, his eyes darting around. "You did this. You must have bumped it." "What?" "I was in my room." But the story was already written. When my parents got home, Leo put on the performance of a lifetime. He cried. He said he saw me running past the living room, that I was clumsy, that I knocked it over and ran away because I was scared. My mom rushed to comfort him. My dad looked at me, his eyes filled with a familiar disappointment. "Aston," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Tell me the truth." "I didn't do it. Leo is lying," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "He was throwing the football in the house." My father's jaw tightened. He didn't believe in nuance. He believed in the son who looked like him, who acted like him, who knew how to charm him. "Don't you dare blame your brother. You will pay for this. You'll work every weekend at the store. No allowance. Until you've paid back every single cent this thing was worth." Took me 2 years. 2 years of stocking shelves, sweeping floors, and doing inventory every Saturday and Sunday while Leo was out with his friends. The debt was one thing, but the injustice was another. Carved something deep inside me. I learned a crucial lesson that day. In my family, the truth didn't matter as much as the narrative. And Leo was always the hero of the story. I was, at best, a supporting character. At worst, I was the villain. This dynamic followed us into adulthood and into the family business. The business, a specialty home goods store my grandfather had started, was our entire life. Leo was the face of the company. He handled sales, schmoozed with clients, and took all the credit. I was the engine. I ran the back end, managed the finances, built the online store from scratch, and made sure we actually made a profit. He was the showman. I was the one who made sure the show could go on. He got the applause. I got the payroll headaches and the late nights staring at spreadsheets. For years, I told myself it was fine. We were a team. We were family. But the debt of that broken vase was never truly paid off. It just kept getting bigger. As the years went on, the business became more complex. The world moved online, and I moved us with it. I implemented a new inventory system, optimized our supply chain, and built a digital marketing strategy that tripled our online sales in 2 years. I was the one on the phone with the bank, negotiating a better line of credit when cash flow was tight. I was the one who figured out the tax loopholes that saved us thousands of dollars every year. My father, who came from an old-school way of doing business, didn't understand any of it. He just knew the numbers on the bottom line looked good. And he gave the credit to Leo. "Leo's a natural," he'd say at family dinners. "He's got the magic touch. The clients love him." The breaking point, the moment I realized that my contributions would never, ever be seen, came about a year before the Thanksgiving incident. We had a huge client, a high-end interior designer named Mrs. Sterling. She was notoriously difficult, but her firm accounted for nearly 30% of our annual revenue. She was our whale. And Leo, in his infinite carelessness, nearly lost her. He had promised her a custom order of imported fabrics for a massive hotel project. He wrote down the wrong product numbers. A simple, stupid mistake. But it meant that an entire shipping container of the wrong material was already on its way from Italy. The deadline was in 3 weeks. It was a disaster that could not only cost us the contract but could also bankrupt the company with cancellation fees and unsellable inventory. Leo came to me in a panic. "You have to fix this," he said, running his hands through his hair. "If Dad finds out, he'll kill me." "Fix it? Leo, this is a 6-figure mistake," I said, my stomach twisting into a knot. I spent the next 72 hours in a caffeine-fueled nightmare. I was on the phone with the shipping company, with customs brokers, with the manufacturer in Italy. I was speaking broken Italian at 3 a.m., begging, pleading, and pulling every string I could. I found a way to reroute the shipment to another one of their buyers in the UK and convinced the manufacturer to expedite a new, correct order and air freight it at a massive cost. A cost I managed to partially offset by calling in a favor with a logistics company I'd built a relationship with. I updated Mrs. Sterling personally, every step of the way. I didn't blame Leo. I just said there was a logistical error that was being corrected. I saved the deal. The fabric arrived with 24 hours to spare. Mrs. Sterling was so impressed with my transparency and problem-solving that she signed an even larger contract for the following year. I single-handedly saved our company from ruin. I collapsed into bed that weekend, exhausted but proud. I had done it. The following Monday, my dad called a family meeting at the office. I walked in, expecting, for the first time in my life, a little bit of recognition. My father was beaming. He clapped Leo on the shoulder. "I want to congratulate Leo," he announced to my mother and me. "He just locked in the sterling contract for another year, with a 20% increase. The kid's a miracle worker, just like his old man." I stared, speechless. Leo just stood there, smiling that easy smile of his. He glanced at me, a flicker of something. Guilt? No, it was pity, in his eyes before he turned back to our father. "Thanks, Dad," he said. "Just doing my part." My mother looked at me and winked as if to say, "Let him have this." I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just that they didn't see me. It was that they didn't want to see me. My role was to be the fixer, the ghost in the machine who made the golden boy look good. In that moment, sitting in that cold office, I realized I wasn't a son. I was an employee, and a damn unappreciated one at that. The final crack in the foundation, the one that brought the whole rotten structure down, happened the week before that fateful Thanksgiving call. It was a fight about money, but it was never really about money. It was about respect, or my complete lack of it. I was in the office going over our end-of-year financials when my dad and Leo walked in, excited. They were talking about a new investment. Leo had a hot tip from one of his country club friends about a new retail tech startup. They wanted to pour a significant amount of our capital money we desperately needed for inventory for the Christmas season into this venture. I pulled up the company's prospectus on my computer. It took me less than 10 minutes to see it was a garbage investment. The company had no viable product, a mountain of debt, and a CEO with a history of failed businesses. It was a money pit, wrapped in flashy buzzwords. "We can't do this," I said calmly, turning my screen toward them. "Look at their burn rate. They'll be bankrupt in 6 months. This is a terrible idea." Leo scoffed. "You don't get it, Aston. This is about vision. You're always so stuck in the details." "The details are what keep the lights on," I shot back, my voice rising. "This isn't monopoly money. This is the payroll for our employees. This is the money we need to actually run our business." My father held up a hand, silencing me. He had that look on his face, the one that said I was being difficult, that I was being negative. "Your brother is trying to grow the business, Aston," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "He's out there making connections, thinking about the future. All you do is sit behind a screen and tell us what we can't do." The injustice of it was staggering. I was the one who had built that screen-based world he so easily dismissed. I was the one who made sure he had a business to grow. "I'm trying to protect the business," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I could no longer contain. "I'm the one who actually knows our financial situation. We are not in a position to be gambling." That's when he said it. The words that would echo in my head for days. He stepped closer, his face dark with anger. "You're forgetting your place," he hissed. "You're getting arrogant. You think because you know how to work a computer, you know how to run my company? You're nothing but a glorified bookkeeper. If it wasn't for this family, for me and your brother, you'd be nothing. You should show a little more gratitude." Gratitude. The word hit me like a physical blow. Gratitude for what? For being the family pack mule? For cleaning up every mess? For sacrificing my own time, my own life to prop up their egos? I just stared at him. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a profound, chilling clarity. I saw him. I saw all of them exactly as they were. They didn't value me. They valued my function. And the moment my function became inconvenient, I was the problem. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and walked out of the office without another word. That was the last time I spoke to them before the voicemail. He wasn't just dismissing my opinion. He was dismissing my entire existence. And I finally realized, you can't win a game that's rigged against you. The only move left is to stop playing. After I sent that 2-word text, "I understand," and dismantled my digital life within the company, a strange and terrifying silence descended. The first 24 hours were a blur of adrenaline and anxiety. Every buzz of my phone made my heart leap into my throat. I expected an immediate explosion. A furious call from my dad. A tearful, manipulative one from my mom. Something. But there was nothing. The silence was, in its own way, more damning than any angry voicemail would have been. It confirmed what I already knew. They didn't notice I was gone. My presence, the constant, low-level hum of my work in the background, was so taken for granted that its absence wasn't even detectable. Not yet. I spent that Wednesday trying to pretend it was a normal day. I went to the gym. I bought groceries. But I felt like a phantom, disconnected from my own life. I kept my phone on silent, face down on the counter. The temptation to check it was a physical itch. Was I wrong? Did I overreact? The guilt, ingrained in me since childhood, began to creep in. They were my family. Maybe I should have just sucked it up, gone to Thanksgiving, and endured the passive-aggressive comments and Leo's smug smile for the sake of peace. But then I would remember my father's face, twisted with contempt. You're nothing without us. And the resolve would harden in my gut again. By Wednesday evening, the anxiety was turning into a kind of morbid curiosity. When would the penny drop? When would they reach for a tool and find that it was no longer there? I imagined my dad trying to check the daily sales report and getting an access denied error. I pictured my mom trying to process an online order payment and finding herself locked out. The 36-hour mark hit on Thursday morning. Thanksgiving morning. I woke up to the smell of my neighbor cooking a turkey. The silence from my phone was absolute. I felt a pang of loneliness so sharp it took my breath away. This was the first Thanksgiving of my entire life that I would spend alone. I made myself a simple breakfast, my hands moving mechanically. I thought about them. My mom, probably bustling around the kitchen, complaining that no one was helping her. My dad, watching football on the big screen TV I had set up for him. Leo, probably sleeping in until noon, showing up just in time to eat and accept praise for doing nothing. And me? I wasn't even a ghost at their feast. I had been completely erased. The thought should have been devastating. And it was, in a way. But underneath the pain, there was something else growing. A tiny, fragile seed of freedom. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to smile through clenched teeth. I didn't have to swallow my resentment along with the dry turkey. Right around 1 p.m., just as they would have been sitting down to eat, my phone, which had been dead silent for a day and a half, suddenly lit up. Incoming call, Dad. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the green button. Then I did the hardest thing I'd done yet. I pressed the power button and silenced the call. A few seconds later, a notification popped up. Voicemail. Then another call. Mom. I silenced that one too. Then Leo. Then Dad again. The storm had begun. The calls didn't stop. For the rest of Thanksgiving Day, my phone was a relentless barrage of notifications. It was like they were coordinating their attack, a rotating cast of characters trying to break down my defenses. I didn't listen to any of the voicemails yet. I just watched the call log fill up. By the time I went to bed, I had 32 missed calls. The real panic, however, started on Friday. Black Friday, the single most important sales day of the year for a retail business. I woke up to another 15 missed calls that had come in overnight. I finally decided to listen to the voicemails. I needed to know what I was dealing with. The first few, from Thursday afternoon, were confused. My dad, Aston, pick up the phone. I can't log into the sales dashboard. Did you change the password or something? Call me back. My mom, her voice tight with annoyance. Aston, dear, your father is getting frustrated. Whatever little prank you're pulling, it's not funny. You're ruining the holiday. But the ones from Friday morning were different. The tone had shifted from annoyance to genuine panic. My dad again, his voice strained. The credit card readers at the store aren't syncing with the inventory system. Maria, the store manager, says we're selling things we don't have in stock. There's a madhouse down here. I need the admin password. Now. And then came Leo. His call was a masterpiece of manipulation. He sounded calm, reasonable. The concerned older brother. Hey man, he started, his voice smooth as silk. Listen, I know you're upset, and you have a right to be. Dad was a jerk. But turning off the systems on Black Friday is kind of messing things up for everyone. We've got employees who need this to work. Can you just turn it back on? We can talk after. I promise I'll have your back. It was a good performance. Almost believable. Except for one tiny detail. In the background, I could hear my mother's faint, sharp whisper. Tell him we're sorry. Followed by a muffled sound. They were coaching him. It wasn't a genuine appeal. It was a calculated tactic. They were using my brother as a Trojan horse, hiding their desperation behind his reasonable facade. I deleted the voicemail. The feeling of betrayal was so sharp, so bitter. Even now, even when their entire business was on the line, they couldn't be honest. They couldn't just admit they needed me. They had to try and play me. By 5 p.m. on Friday, the number of missed calls had climbed to 84. The voicemails had become a symphony of desperation. My dad, yelling now, Aston, this is not a joke. The payroll file for next week's direct deposits has to be uploaded by Monday. I don't know the login. The accountant says he can't get in either. Are you trying to destroy this company? My mom, weeping, Aston, please. I don't know what we did to make you hate us this much. Your father is having chest pains. You're tearing this family apart. Just, please call us. The chest pains were a nice touch, a classic from her playbook. They didn't get it. They thought this was about revenge. Tantrum. They couldn't comprehend that this wasn't an attack. It was an abdication. I hadn't broken the system. I had simply walked away from it, and they were discovering that they had no idea how it worked. They were like pilots who had been sitting in a cockpit for years, letting someone else fly the plane, and were just now realizing they didn't know what any of the buttons did as the engine sputtered and died. And we were in a nosedive. By Sunday, the tone of the voicemails took another sharp turn. The pleading and panic were still there, but now they were laced with a venomous, self-righteous anger. The victim narrative was in full swing. My mother, having failed with tears, switched to righteous indignation. She left a long, rambling message Sunday afternoon. I've been thinking about this, Aston, she said, her voice dripping with faux magnanimity. And I've decided to forgive you. I forgive you for your selfishness and for the pain you've caused this family. But you have to meet us halfway. You need to come back and fix what you broke. That's the only way we can begin to heal. She was forgiving me. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of their own actions. In her mind, she had already rewritten the story. I was the prodigal son who had gone astray, and she was the benevolent mother, willing to welcome me back into the fold once I had learned my lesson. My father's messages were more direct. The thin veneer of paternal concern was gone, replaced by pure rage. You know what you are, Aston? He barked into the phone, his voice hoarse. You're ungrateful. We gave you everything. A job, a roof over your head when you needed it. We put you through college. And this is how you repay us? By trying to sabotage the family salary and livelihood? You're a snake. The irony was breathtaking. They were the ones who had told me not to come home. They were the ones who had used the words cut off. They had fired the first shot, the only shot, and now they were screaming that I was the one holding the gun. But the message that truly sealed it for me, the one that erased any lingering shred of doubt or guilt, came late Sunday night. It was my father again. He sounded exhausted, defeated. The bank called, he said, his voice flat. The automatic payment for the lease on the store building didn't go through. It was tied to the account you closed. Our landlord is not happy. I tried to explain, but the system is all locked down. I can't access the funds to make the payment. He took a shaky breath. Why would you do this to us, Aston? After everything we've done for you. This isn't how families treat each other. And that was it. That was the moment I knew there was no going back. This isn't how families treat each other. He was right. Families don't treat their sons like disposable employees. Families don't issue ultimatums and then cry foul when those ultimatums are accepted. Families don't build their entire world on the back of one person and then call him ungrateful for finally standing up straight. I looked at my silent apartment, at the life I was trying to build for myself, separate from their chaos and their expectations. I was done. I wasn't going to fix their problems anymore. This time, they were going to have to face the consequences they had created all by themselves. But I was naive. I thought the worst was over. I had no idea they were about to come after the one thing I owned that was truly mine. Monday morning came, and with it, the payroll deadline. The calls started at 7 a.m. I ignored them. I knew what they were about. The employees weren't getting paid, and my family was in full-blown meltdown. But around noon, a call came in from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ben, my childhood friend. "Aston? Man, are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "I just got a weird call from your brother." My blood ran cold. "Leo called you? Why?" "He was asking if I knew where you were. Said there was a family emergency," Ben said. "He sounded weird. He mentioned something about you being unstable. And then he said something about your car." "My car? What about my car?" There was a pause. "He said your dad was thinking of selling it. He said since the title was still in your dad's name, they needed the cash to cover business expenses you'd sabotaged." I felt a white-hot rage that eclipsed everything I'd felt before. My car. It was a 3-year-old sedan, nothing fancy, but it was the first major thing I had bought for myself. I had paid my father for it in full 8 months ago, a direct transfer from my savings account. The deal was that he would handle the title transfer with the DMV. I trusted him. Like an idiot, I trusted him. It was a loose end, a thread of connection I had foolishly allowed to remain. And now they were using it as a weapon. "Thanks for telling me, Ben," I said, my voice tight. "I have to go." This was a declaration of war. They weren't just trying to get me to come back to work. They were trying to punish me, to hurt me, to take something from me. I hung up and tore my apartment apart, searching for the bill of sale and the bank statement showing the transfer. I found them in my file cabinet, my hands shaking. I needed proof. I needed leverage. As I was digging through the folder labeled Auto, my fingers brushed against another, thicker folder tucked in the back. Business financials old. I hadn't looked at it in years. It contained old loan applications, annual reports, things from before I had digitized everything. On a whim, I pulled it out, and what I found made my blood run even colder than Leo's call. It was all there in black and white. A loan application from 5 years ago, denied by the bank due to insufficient cash flow. A stack of letters from creditors threatening legal action from around the same time. And then, a revised business plan, submitted a few months later, detailing a new online strategy and inventory management system that secured the loan and saved the company. I had written that plan. I dug deeper. I found evidence of 2 other times the business had been on the brink of complete collapse, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Both times, it was saved by a project I had spearheaded. The first time was the launch of our e-commerce site, and the second was a supply chain overhaul I had designed. They had hidden this from me. All those years, I thought I was just helping out. I thought I was the responsible son, doing his part for a healthy, thriving family business. The truth was, there was no healthy business. It was a sinking ship, and I was the only one, bailing water, patching the holes, and keeping it afloat year after year. They weren't just taking me for granted. They were actively concealing their own incompetence and my critical importance. My salary wasn't just compensation. It was the cost of their survival, a cost they clearly felt was too high. The anger I felt before was nothing compared to this. This was a betrayal on a level I couldn't comprehend. My father's words echoed in my head. "You're nothing without us." He had it backward. Completely, utterly backward. The car was no longer just about a car. The business was no longer just about a job. This was about my life. About the decade of my life I had given them, unknowingly propping up a lie. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the constant undermining of my worth. It was all a strategy to keep me in my place, to ensure their indispensable tool never realized it could walk away. I couldn't fight them on their terms anymore. They fought dirty. They used love as a weapon and family as a cage. I needed an ally. Someone they couldn't manipulate. Someone they couldn't lie to. There was only one person. I gathered the documents. The bill of sale for my car, the bank statement, and the old financial records from the folder. I put them into a briefcase. My hands were steady now. The rage had burned away the fear and the doubt, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I walked out of my apartment and got into my car, and started driving. I wasn't going to my parents' house. I wasn't going to the store. I was going to the one place I knew the truth might actually matter. I was going to my grandfather's house. Not my mom's dad. My dad's dad. Mr. Harrison. The man who had started it all, and the one person in the family my father was genuinely afraid of. My grandfather, Mr. Harrison, was a man carved from granite and quiet dignity. He was a retired businessman who had built his own success from nothing before handing the reins of the store to my father 10 years ago. He lived in the same modest but immaculate house he'd lived in for 50 years. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. I sat in his study, the smell of old books and leather filling the air, and I laid everything out. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just presented the facts. The voicemail. The years of being the family fixer. The Mrs. Sterling incident. The final fight. The financial records I'd found showing how close to ruin they'd been. And finally, the threat to sell my car. I handed him the bill of sale and the bank statement. He listened without interruption, his gaze fixed on me, his eyes sharp and intelligent. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. He picked up the financial documents, his brow furrowed. "I suspected as much," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Your father has the ambition, but not the discipline. All show, no substance." He looked at the bill of sale for the car. "This is dishonorable." He picked up the phone on his desk. "Richard," he said when my father answered. "You, Eleanor, and Leo will be at my house in 1 hour. We have a family matter to discuss." He didn't wait for a reply. He just hung up. An hour later, they arrived. They walked into the study with an air of cautious arrogance. My father looked annoyed, my mother looked worried, and Leo just looked bored. They saw me sitting there and their expressions hardened. "What is this, Dad?" my father asked, trying to sound authoritative. "Aston has been causing a lot of trouble." "Silence," my grandfather said, and the word cut through the air like a blade. My father flinched and shut his mouth. My grandfather looked at my father. "You are planning to sell Aston's car." It wasn't a question. My mother jumped in. "It's a misunderstanding. The car is still in Richard's name. We just needed to free up some capital temporarily because Aston abandoned the business." "Did he pay you for the vehicle?" my grandfather asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "It was more of a loan. An arrangement," my father stammered. "That's a lie," I said, my voice clear and steady. My grandfather slid the bill of sale and the bank statement across the polished mahogany desk. "This is a record of a transfer for the full asking price 8 months ago. This is a bill of sale signed by you, Richard. What you are planning is not freeing up capital. It is theft, and it is fraud." My parents' faces went pale. Leo shifted uncomfortably. "Now, about the business," my grandfather continued, his gaze sweeping over all three of them. "You told me things were fine, thriving, in fact. But these old records Aston found tell a different story. A story of near bankruptcy multiple times. We had some cash flow issues," my father blustered. "Every business does. We handled it." "No," my grandfather said, his voice dropping even lower. "He handled it." He gestured toward me. "He built the systems that saved you. He saved the contracts your golden boy almost lost. He has been the foundation of that business for years, while you three have been playing house." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto my father. "And there's one more thing you seem to have forgotten. When I retired, I didn't just hand you the keys. I set up a family trust. A trust that legally owns the business assets, the inventory, the name. A trust that I am the sole trustee of." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And the building you operate out of? You are not just my tenants. I am not just your landlord. I am your only creditor. Your entire professional lives are in my hands." The air in the room went still. My father looked like he'd been punched in the gut. My mother stared, her mouth slightly agape. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had forgotten who held the real power. The silence that followed my grandfather's revelation was absolute. It was the silence of a checkmate. My father, a man who had never been at a loss for words, just stared, his face a mask of disbelief. My mother looked from my grandfather to me, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. They were realizing the game was over, and they had lost before they even knew they were playing for the highest stakes. My grandfather picked up the phone again. "Mr. Chun, you can come in now." A moment later, the door to the study opened and an older, impeccably dressed gentleman walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. Mr. Chun, the family lawyer, the man who had drafted every will and contract for the Harrisons for 40 years. My father's face went from pale to ashen. What is this?" my mother whispered. Mr. Chun didn't look at them. He placed his briefcase on the desk, opened it, and laid out a sheaf of documents. "Richard Eleanor Leo," my grandfather said, his voice calm and final. "For 10 years, I have watched you mismanage my legacy. I have watched you exploit my grandson. I have watched you take and take and take and call it running a business. That ends today." He gestured to the papers. "Mr. Chun has, under my direction, drawn up an amendment to the Harrison Family Trust. It's a restructuring, effective immediately." He let that hang in the air. My father finally found his voice. "A restructuring? What does that mean?" "You can't just—" "I can," my grandfather stated, his authority absolute. "As trustee, I can do whatever is necessary to protect the assets of the trust. And it has become clear to me that the single greatest threat to those assets is your incompetence and your greed." He picked up the top sheet of paper. "First, Aston is to be appointed Chief Operating Officer of the company, with full and unilateral control over all financial, operational, and strategic decisions. His salary will be commensurate with his title and responsibilities, drawn from company profits." I felt my breath catch in my chest. I looked at my grandfather, stunned. He wasn't finished. "You, Richard, will be moved to the honorary title of president. You will have no operational authority. You, Eleanor, will retain your title as a consultant, with no access to company accounts. And you, Leo, will be given the title of sales associate. You will report directly to the COO." He looked straight at my brother. "You will learn the value of a hard day's work, or you will be fired. Your performance will be judged on merit, not name." Leo looked like he was going to be sick. "This is insane!" my father finally exploded, finding his bluster again. "This is my company. You can't just hand it over to him. This is our inheritance." "It was never your company," my grandfather corrected him coldly. "It was a stewardship, and you have failed. The inheritance you speak of is not a guarantee. It is a privilege and one that can be revoked. This is no longer a family charity. It is a business. Aston will run it. If you choose to stay on under these new terms, you will treat him with the respect his position demands. If not, you are free to walk away with nothing." My mother started to sob, a quiet, theatrical whimper. "After all we've done, this is how you repay us?" My grandfather's eyes were like ice. "No, Eleanor. This is how I repay him." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not just respect in his eyes, but a deep, abiding affection. For his loyalty, for his hard work, and for his silence in the face of your endless disrespect. Mr. Chun slid a pen and another document across the desk toward my father. "That," he said, his voice neutral, "is the title transfer for the car. You will sign it now." This was the moment that changed everything. The moment I finally got back control of my own life. "Thank you for staying with me to this point. You are amazing. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story, but it lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone else. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey." My father stared at the title transfer document as if it were a venomous snake. The pen lay next to it, a small, black instrument of his total and complete surrender. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick marking a second of his humiliation. He looked up, a desperate, last-ditch appeal in his eyes, first at his father, then at the lawyer. He found no sympathy. Mr. Chen's face was a professional blank. My grandfather's was a mask of cold disappointment. There was no escape. With a hand that trembled visibly, my father picked up the pen. The scratch of the nib on the paper was unnaturally loud in the silent room. He signed his name. His signature, usually a bold, arrogant scrawl, was cramped and shaky. He shoved the paper back across the desk without looking at me. Mr. Chun calmly took the document, inspected the signature, and placed it neatly into his briefcase. "This will be filed with the DMV first thing in the morning, Aston. The car is officially yours." "That's all," my grandfather said. The dismissal was absolute. My family stood up like wooden puppets whose strings had been cut. My father wouldn't look at me. My mother was still dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, her performance of a grieving matriarch utterly failing to land. Leo just looked lost, a hollowed-out version of his former self. They filed out of the study without another word. The sound of the front door closing behind them was a soft, final thud. I was left alone in the study with my grandfather. The tension that had been coiled in my shoulders for a decade began to unspool. I felt light, almost dizzy with relief. My grandfather looked at me, the hardness in his eyes softening. "This should have been done years ago," he said, a note of regret in his voice. "I saw the signs, but I hoped your father would grow into the role. Pride can be a blinding thing." "I don't know what to say," I managed, my voice hoarse. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said, waving a hand. "You earned this. You just never sent the invoice." He stood up and walked over to a small cabinet, pulling out 2 glasses and a bottle of aged whiskey. "But now," he said, pouring 2 generous measures, "the company is where it belongs, in the hands of the person who actually built it." He handed me a glass. "To the new COO." We clinked glasses. The whiskey burned a warm path down my throat, the first warmth I had felt in days. It wasn't the taste of victory. It was the taste of justice. I drove home that night in my car, gripping the steering wheel. Felt different. Felt truly mine. But I knew the fight wasn't completely over. The legal battle was won, but the emotional war would have its aftershocks. Sure enough, late that night, my phone lit up with a text message. It was from my mother. It was an essay, a long, winding narrative of her pain, her disappointment, her shock at my betrayal. She wrote about how I had gone behind their backs, how I had manipulated my grandfather. She talked about the sanctity of family and how I had shattered it. And then came the final manipulative flourish, the part that was meant to hook me back in. "But despite the terrible pain you've caused me," she wrote, "I am your mother, and I forgive you. We can get through this, if you are willing to come to the table and help us heal as a family. We can put this all behind us." I read the message twice. The old Aston, the one from a week ago, would have felt a pang of guilt. He would have agonized over it, wondering if he was the monster she was painting him to be. He would have been tempted to reply, to defend himself, to plead his case one more time. But I wasn't that person anymore. I saw the text for what it was, a desperate, last-ditch effort to pull me back into the old dynamic. It was an invitation to return to a game I had no intention of playing ever again. There was no apology, no ownership of her part in the disaster. Just blame, wrapped in the guise of forgiveness. I looked at her name on the screen. I thought about the years of passive aggression, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the way she had always enabled my father and my brother at my expense. My finger hovered over the screen. Then, with a sense of finality and profound peace, I pressed and held her contact. The options popped up. Block, delete. I blocked her number, then my father's, then Leo's. I didn't need to say another word. The boundary had been drawn. My silence was my answer. The first few weeks after the confrontation were strange. My parents and Leo showed up to work, as my grandfather had dictated. The atmosphere was thick with attention you could cut with a knife. They moved around the office like ghosts, their former authority stripped away, leaving only resentment. My father would sit in his president's office with the door closed all day. My mother would wander through the store, rearranging displays with a martyred sigh. Leo actually had to work, and he was terrible at it. He was late, he was lazy, and his sales numbers were pathetic. But I didn't fire him. I managed him just as I would any underperforming employee. I documented his tardiness. I put him on a performance improvement plan. I was professional, detached, and fair. It drove them insane. My real focus was on the business. With the keys to the kingdom, I did what I had been dying to do for years. I gave long overdue raises to key staff members, like Maria, the store manager who had been with us for 20 years and had seen it all. The look on her face when I told her about her 20% salary increase and a new bonus structure was worth more than any apology from my family. I renegotiated contracts with our suppliers, saving thousands. I invested in the technology they called a waste of money, which streamlined our operations and improved our profit margins. I launched 2 new product lines they had vetoed. The business didn't just survive, it thrived. Profits were up 40% in the first 6 months. The employees, free from the toxic and chaotic management of my parents, were happier and more productive. The store felt lighter. My relationship with my grandfather deepened. We had dinner once a week. He never interfered with the business, but he acted as a mentor, a sounding board. He told me stories about his early days, the struggles he faced. I learned more from him in those 7 months than I had from my own father in 28 years. He told me once, after reviewing a stellar quarterly report, "I'm proud of you, son." It was a simple sentence, but it healed a part of me I thought would be broken forever. I was building a new life. I reconnected with old friends like Ben. I even started dating someone, a wonderful woman named Sarah who was a landscape architect. She was kind and independent, and when I told her, vaguely, about my family situation, she didn't offer pity. She offered respect. "It takes a lot of strength to do what you did," she said, and I believed her. My parents remained in their self-imposed exile, communicating only through terse emails when absolutely necessary. They were figureheads, living off the success of a company they no longer controlled, a constant, silent reminder of the past. But they were a past I no longer had to answer to. I was finally the main character in my own story. One Tuesday afternoon, about 8 months after everything had changed, I got an email from Leo. It was a single line, "Can we talk? Just you and me, outside of the office." My first instinct was to say no. I couldn't imagine what we had to talk about, but curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet him at a small, neutral coffee shop halfway between my place and his. He was already there when I arrived. He looked different. The easy, confident swagger was gone. He looked tired. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing a simple polo shirt, not the designer clothes he used to favor. "Thanks for coming," he said, not quite meeting my eye. "What's this about, Leo?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He stirred his coffee for a long time before he spoke. "I quit," he said quietly. "I gave you my 2 weeks' notice this morning. I'm moving out of state." I was surprised, but I didn't say anything. I just waited. "I needed to tell you something before I left," he continued, finally looking up at me. And for the first time, I didn't see the arrogant golden boy. I just saw a sad, lost man. "All those years, I was so jealous of you." I almost laughed. "Jealous? Of me? You had everything." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I didn't. I had the charm. I had Dad's approval. But I didn't have the talent. You did. You were smart. You could just do things. You understood the business, the numbers, the computers. It was like magic to me. I'd watch you fix these huge problems that I had created, and Dad would praise me for it, and it felt good for a minute. But then I'd look at you, and I knew I was a fraud." He took a shaky breath. "I hated you for it. I hated that you were better than me at the one thing that was supposed to be our family's legacy. So I let you be the bad guy. I let you take the blame. It was easier than admitting that I couldn't do it, that I was a failure. He looked down at his hands. When grandfather put you in charge, I was furious. But after a few weeks of actually having to work, of having to face my own incompetence every single day, I realized he was right. I don't have it. I never did. He finally looked me in the eye again. I'm sorry, Aston. I'm sorry for all of it. For the vase. For the sterling contract. For everything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to hear it. It was the most honest thing my brother had ever said to me. The anger and resentment I had carried for him for so long just dissolved. It wasn't replaced by love or affection, but by a kind of quiet, sad understanding. He wasn't my villain. He was just another victim of the same toxic system, just one who had been on the winning side of it. Good luck, Leo, I said, and I meant it. He nodded, gave me a small, sad smile, and walked out of the coffee shop. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a reunion, but it was closure. And sometimes that's even better. It's been over a year now. Leo did move away. I hear from my grandfather that he's working a modest sales job, living in a small apartment. He's paying his own bills for the first time in his life. Maybe he'll be okay. My parents are still at the company, shadows in an empire they no longer rule. Our relationship is purely professional, a quiet, cold truce. Some things I've learned can't be fixed, and maybe they shouldn't be. Sometimes, on a sunny afternoon, I take my car out for a drive. I'll head out of the city onto the open highway with the windows down and the music playing. It's just a car. Steel, glass, and rubber. But to me, it's more than that. It's a symbol. It's the thing they tried to take from me, the final overreach that broke the spell. Every time I turn the key in the ignition, I'm reminded of the choice I made. The choice to stop accepting the unacceptable. The choice to demand my own value when no one else would. The fight for that car led me to a much bigger fight. For my life, for my self-respect. The business continues to grow. We're even planning an expansion. My grandfather is my biggest cheerleader. I have good friends. I have Sarah. I have a life that is quiet and productive and peaceful. A life I built. Looking back, the pain of that Thanksgiving was excruciating. Being cut off by your own family is a wound that never fully disappears. But sometimes the most destructive act can lead to the most profound creation. They tried to cut me out, but all they really did was cut me loose. And for the first time in my life, I was free to fly. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a difficult choice to stand up for yourself, even if it meant shaking up your entire world? I'd be honored to read about your experience in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Your support truly means the world.